Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to take you through a deep dive into the crisis unfolding in Belarus, a country long seen as a stronghold for authoritarian resilience, and explore whether the military is finally cracking, and what that means for Lukashenko's regime. For decades, Alexander Lukashenko has ruled Belarus with a tight grip. Political opposition has been repressed, media controlled, and security forces loyal. Yet recent signals point to growing instability, restiveness within the security apparatus, and fractures that could herald a tipping point. If the subtitle Belarus in Chaos, Military Breaks Ranks, Lukashenko's Regime Crumbling, is correct, we need to parse what evidence supports it and what obstacles remain. First, let's look at the military itself, its structure, history, and role in Belarusian power. Belarus inherited a Soviet-style military, heavy in ground forces, modest in air capabilities, and no naval presence since the country is landlocked. Over the years, the Belarusian armed forces have become oriented less toward external projection and more toward internal control, regime security, and cooperation with Moscow. Many analysts point out that much of Belarus's equipment is aging, and its real strength lies in its capacity for internal suppression through special units, riot police, border forces, and internal troops. The Belarusian military also hosts Russian assets on its soil and aligns closely with Russia's defense posture. In recent years, there have been clear signs that the regime is trying to shore up loyalty within its forces. In mid-2025, Lukashenko signed decrees promoting a number of military officers to the rank of Major General, a move widely interpreted as rewarding loyalty and consolidating command structures. Around the same time, Belarus began large mobilization exercises in regions like Brest, calling reservists to refresh combat readiness. On one hand, these are standard military readiness measures. On the other, they could mask internal anxiety about regime stability and the loyalty of key officers. But what about signs of actual splits or dissent within the ranks? That's where things get interesting. Recently, reports and online discussions have surfaced claiming that Belarusian forces are disobeying orders, refusing to suppress protests, or otherwise distancing themselves from Lukashenko's hardline stance. Some sources even suggest that certain elite units have become sympathetic to opposition sentiments out of fear of being drawn into a wider regional conflict. These are dramatic claims and deserve closer examination. So far, verified instances of outright military rebellion in Belarus are limited. There haven't been major open mutinies, coups, or public defections from the regular army, at least not yet. However, there have been symbolic acts of resistance that show cracks beneath the surface. One of the most significant was the 2023 drone attack on the Machulishchi airbase near Minsk, where a Russian A-50 early warning plane was damaged. A group of former Belarusian security officers opposed to Lukashenko claimed responsibility. Initially, Lukashenko denied the damage, then later admitted the aircraft was sent for repairs and announced a wave of arrests. That incident revealed that organized dissent within the country's security structures is possible, even if still contained. Another telling sign is the growing number of Belarusian volunteers fighting alongside Ukraine. The first separate air assault company, formed by Belarusian volunteers, is one of several units composed of Belarusians who have chosen to oppose Lukashenko's alignment with Moscow by joining Ukraine's defense efforts. While these individuals don't represent the Belarusian army as a whole, their existence highlights ideological fractures, showing that a segment of Belarus's military-minded population no longer identifies with the current regime. We also can't ignore the ongoing purges and disciplinary actions. Ahead of elections, Belarusian authorities have carried out anti-riot drills, stripped ranks from officers accused of disloyalty, and tightened surveillance across the security apparatus. These actions reveal the regime's growing fear of internal decay. Lukashenko's government clearly worries that some members of the security forces might hesitate or refuse to act if another mass protest movement erupts. So where does that leave us? Is Lukashenko's regime truly crumbling? The answer is, not yet, but the stress points are visible. The system still retains enormous coercive power, control over security services, intelligence, propaganda, and a network of elites who owe their positions to the regime. However, several vulnerabilities are becoming increasingly apparent. First, there's the risk of internal fragmentation. If even a single elite unit, for example special forces or internal troops, were to refuse orders or express open dissent, it could trigger a domino effect, leading others to follow suit. Second, loyalty among officers is not absolute. Promotions, purges, and benefits may sustain allegiance temporarily, but over time, fear and opportunism erode genuine loyalty. Third, external entanglement with Russia complicates everything. Belarus's economy, energy supply, and defense strategy are all heavily dependent on Moscow. This dependency limits Lukashenko's room for maneuver. It also means that any internal conflict in Belarus will inevitably draw in Russian interests, whether to prop him up or to manage the fallout. Then there's the issue of public unrest. The Belarusian people have endured years of repression, sanctions, and economic hardship. The 2020 protests showed that the population's appetite for change is strong. However, those protests were crushed brutally, and since then Lukashenko has ruled through fear. If economic pain intensifies or morale within the military weakens, that fear could flip into anger. And anger combined with defection in the ranks is a potent mix. If we imagine a potential breakdown scenario, it could look like this. Discontent within elite security circles coincides with a surge of mass protests. The government orders the army to restore control, but key units refuse to act. Without the loyalty of the military, Lukashenko would lose his primary instrument of coercion. The regime could then unravel quickly, as state institutions, ministries, and even local officials shift allegiance or go into hiding. Still, there are significant obstacles preventing that from happening soon. Lukashenko's regime is highly experienced in suppression. It maintains an intricate surveillance network, controls most media channels, and keeps close tabs on both the military and civilian population. The system of fear and loyalty it has built over decades is resilient. Even if minor acts of defiance occur, they are often swiftly and harshly punished. The regime could also rely on Russian support in a moment of crisis, either through intelligence assistance, hybrid control, or even direct presence on Belarusian soil. It's also worth considering the psychology of the military itself. Many soldiers and officers, while discontented, may still fear chaos more than dictatorship. They've been told for years that opposition equals instability, foreign interference, or civil war. That fear of the unknown can keep even unhappy soldiers loyal. As long as the chain of command remains intact, and the regime maintains control over resources and salaries, widespread defection remains unlikely. So, when people talk about the military breaking ranks or the regime crumbling, the reality is more nuanced. What we are witnessing is not open rebellion, but mounting tension, quiet dissent, and early signs of erosion in the regime's internal cohesion. These are the warning tremors that often precede a more dramatic collapse. But the final quake hasn't hit yet. Looking ahead, it's likely that Lukashenko will continue a dual strategy of repression and reward, purging those deemed unreliable while promoting those who prove loyal. He may further integrate Belarusian forces with Russian command structures, hoping that external alignment will strengthen internal discipline. But this approach carries risks. The more Belarus's military depends on Russia, the less sovereignty the country retains. In the long run, the stability of Lukashenko's regime depends on his ability to maintain that fragile balance between fear and loyalty. History shows that authoritarian systems often appear solid until the moment they suddenly crack. Belarus could follow that path if the right combination of internal dissent, public unrest, and external pressure aligns. Whether that moment comes in months or years remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. The era of quiet stability in Belarus is fading fast, and the next phase will test the strength of both the regime and the nation itself. Let me know if you'd like me to dive deeper into this topic in a follow-up, maybe exploring how similar cracks appeared in other regimes before their fall, or how Russia's involvement could shape Belarus's future if the current system starts to unravel.